Alright, ladies and gentlemen, we welcome you back to yet another fabulous episode of the Friday Ramblings. I am your perpetual host, the Bardic one, David, because it's Friday, and on Friday we ramble about your favorite entertainment-based things. Woo! So we're going to sit there and get into some history breakdown today. We're getting into the pro wrestling. We are going to discuss the many tag team titles that have been used over the decades by WWE. Now, I know, your casual person is vaguely familiar with pro wrestling and be like, oh yeah, one promotion, one tag team championship, right? Not so much. Oh yeah, they got that brand extension thing, so it's like what, one for each show? That's what, 2, 3? Not so much. We have got a lot more titles than that to discuss because, hey, that's the way things go down in pro wrestling. Nothing is ever as simple as it seems, which is why you need great historians. Now, sadly, I'm not necessarily a great wrestling historian, but I am going to give you just the quick run of it. Give you that little hint of how much history there is. So let's start things off, and yes, I have my notes because, as I said, there's a lot of titles to keep track of. We start off in the beginnings of the various earliest history of the company that can consider to be the modern WWE, which is its original incarnation of the Capital Wrestling Corporation, in which they briefly used the Northeast version of the NWA World Tag Team Championship. Now, we discussed the NWA's tag team histories on a previous video, so please check that out for more wrestling tag team goodness. And when I say briefly, I do mean briefly. Well, the original champions were the Wildman Stevens and Wildman Fargo, better known as Don and Jackie Fargo. Very important guys to wrestling history. You should look them up for research on your own later. We're not sure exactly when they were crowned champions, as the earliest verifiable record is from February 26, 1957, when they had their earliest verified and recorded title defense. Now, they would lose their titles only a few days later, on March 30th, 1957, to the iconic Antonio Rocca and Miguel Perez in a 2 out of 3 falls match, in which Rocca and Perez won 2-1. Rocca and Perez would hold on to the titles until June 1961, when the titles were deactivated and abandoned. Next, we get up to the United States Tag Team Championship that was originally Capital Wrestling's territorial version of the NWA United States Tag Team Championship from 58 until 63, and later, once the company broke off from the NWA, it was known as the WWF United States Tag Team Championship, and as such is the first version of a main tag team title in the Worldwide Wrestling Federation, which would be the precursor to the World Wrestling Federation, which would be eventually renamed World Wrestling Entertainment, which is what it's currently known as, WWE. See, that's the thing. We haven't even gotten to the WWF era yet, folks, and we're on our second tag team title. Now, again, we're going to go through this real quick. Your original champions were Mark Lewin and Don Curtis in July of 1958, defeating Hans Schmidt and Dick the Bruiser in a tournament final. Later, the Graham brothers, Jerry and Eddie Graham, would win the titles for a few months before losing them back to Lewin, and Curtis would lose them back to the Grahams before they were vacated when Eddie Graham left the promotion, this bringing in champions of Jerry Graham and Johnny Valentine. Eddie Graham would come back, so you would get the Graham brothers regaining the tag team titles. You would then have such champions as Red and Lou Bastion, Fabulous Kangaroos, Al Costello and Roy Heffernan, Johnny Valentine and Buddy Rogers, both very famous and excellent wrestlers. Johnny Valentine and Bob Ellis, Buddy Austin and George Scott, also known as the Great Scott, who were the champions at the point that they broke off from the NWA and it was renamed the WWF United States Tag Team Championships. So an important note for there. You then have such greats as Skull Murphy and Brute Bernard, Killer Kowalski, who would go on to train many excellent wrestlers and probably deserves an episode of his own, Gorilla Monsoon, who, due to his backstage work for decades after his active in-ring retirement, is definitely going to get an episode of his own because he is one of the most important figures in WWF history. The Tolos brothers, Dr. Jerry Graham and Luke Graham, Gene Knitsky and Waldo Von Erich, Gorilla Monsoon and Bill Watts. Woo! I'm sorry, I ain't picking a fight with Bill Watts. And a few other tag team champions, including the Sicilians, Lou Albano and Tony Altamore. Your final champions being Bruno Sammartino and Spyros Arion. Make sure I pronounce this right. Spyros Arion had previously held the championship with a couple others, so he was one of our first examples in WWF of a tag team specialist. A guy who would hold tag teams with multiple championships with multiple partners over the years. The title was finally deactivated in July 24th of 1967 when there was a little bit of controversy with the fact that Bruno Sammartino was also the WWF champion and thus was unable to defend both championships. Instead of finding another partner for Spyros, the titles were simply deactivated. For your record, the longest number of days holding that the United States Tag Team Championship would go to the Fabulous Kangaroos at 514 days. Although the most number of reigns was held by Jerry and Eddie Graham at 4 reigns, totaling a combined 173 days. We then get another relatively brief title, but at this point it is 1969, and this is the WWF International Tag Team Championship, which would also be defended in New Japan Pro Wrestling. Your first champions are the team of the Rising Suns, Toru Tanaka and Mitsu Arakawa, who won the titles on June 1st of 1969 in a fictitious tournament. This happens a lot in pro wrestling. You would later have champions such as Victor Rivera and Tony Marino. The Mongols, Beppo and Gato. Bruno Sammartino and Dominic DeNucci. Luke Graham and Tarzan Tyler. And the final champions being Tatsumi Fujinami and Kengo Kimura, who defeated Dick Murdoch and Adrian Adonis in a tournament final to win the vacated belts, and would hold them for 159 days before the titles were abandoned when New Japan ended its partnership with the WWF, which, because yes, over the course of this it had been named the WWF by this point in time. So let's go right through here real quick. Your longest reigning champions and the only champions to hold the titles more than one time is, and thus the most number of reigns, goes to Beppo and Geto the Mongols. Beppo Mongol would later go on to be most known in WWF as Nikolai Volkov. So, good times. We're going to go ahead and jump ship real quick while we're discussing titles that were co-defended in Japan. A very brief championship in the WWF, as in it only occurred for about 7 months in 1991, which is the WWF Intercontinental Tag Team Championship. In a way, this was kind of a spiritual successor to the International Tag Team Championship we just discussed, as this was part of a deal with WWF working with UWF Japan. There was only one champions, and that was Pero Aguayo and Gran Hamada. And if you know about Japanese wrestling, you will know Gran Hamada is a huge legend in Japan. However, the working arrangement with UWF Japan was not meant to last, and so after several months, the titles were abandoned. Now this brings us to the fun times. This is the championship that most people know of when they look at WWF history. Originally established by the then WWF on June 3rd, 1971, we have the World Tag Team Championship, and served as the only title for tag teams in the promotion until the WCW buyout in March 2001, when the WWF briefly had control of the WCW Championship before retiring it along with the other WCW titles. Now, title is also called, we're going to go through this real quick because, again, we do want to talk about the fun of this, and we have a lot more tag titles to discuss. All the various names of this belt that existence was the WWF World Tag Team Championship from 71 to 79, from the WWF Tag Team Championship from 79 to 83, the WWF World Tag Team Championship from 1983 to 2002, and in 2002, when the first brand extension hit, it became the WWE Tag Team Championship, very briefly before being cemented as the World Tag Team Championship until 2010, when it was retired after a year of being part of the Unified Tag Team Championship, along with the second WWE Tag Team Championship, which we will talk about in a moment. But yes, this title ran from 1971 until 2010. So, that's a pretty good length of time. You're talking 40 years. Let's break this down really quick. The original champions were Luke Graham and Tarzan Tyler in June 3rd of 1971, having won the titles by defeating Dick the Bruiser and the Sheik in a tournament final. Many iconic early champions were Karl Gotch and Rene Goulet, Chief Jay Strongbow and Sonny King, Mr. Fuji and Professor Tanaka, Haystacks Calhoun and Tony Guerrera, the Valiant Brothers, Jimmy and Johnny Valiant, Dominic DeNucci and Victor Rivera, the Blackjacks, Blackjack Lanza and Blackjack Mulligan, who have both gone on to have a long history in WWE, specifically Blackjack Mulligan, who is part of a family of wrestlers. The Executioners, better known as Executioner number 1, Killer Kowalski, and Executioner number 2, Big John Studd, who caused the first time the titles were vacated, when the Executioners were stripped of the championship, when a third masked Executioner, the aforementioned Beppo Mongol, who would eventually become Nikolai Volkov, showed up to cause shenanigans in the match. Billy White Wolf and Chief Jay Strongbow would win the titles. However, they vacated it after only 237 days when Billy White Wolf injured his neck in a match against Ken Patera. Mr. Fuji and Professor Tanaka would later regain the titles, defeating Tony Guerrera and Larry Zbyszko in a tournament final to win the Vacate Championship. You'd also have Dino Bravo and Dominic DeNucci, the Yukon Lumberjacks, Eric and Pierre, Larry Zbyszko and Tony Guerrera. The Valiant brothers, this time Jerry Valiant, joining Johnny Valiant. Ivan Putski and Tito Santana, the Wild Samoans, Bob Backlund and Pedro Morales. Before we get another title vacating due to Bob Backlund's status as WWF Heavyweight Champion. Nice little one-day reign for them at the famous Showdown at Shea match in 1980. Or event. That was one match on the event. Before the vacant titles were grabbed by the Wild Samoans, Afa and Sika, who of course are part of the famous Anoa'i family, who we will see some other tag teams involved with later. Some of your other iconic champions are the Moondogs, Rick Martel and Tony Guerrera. Mr. Fuji would come back, joined by Mr. Saito, Chief Jay Strongbow, and Jules Strongbow. The Soul Patrol of Rocky Johnson and Tony Atlas. It is at this point that we get the official World Wrestling Federation rename, and such great teams as the North-South Connection of Adrian Adonis and Dick Murdoch, the U.S. Express of Barry Windham and Mike Rotundo. Hey, Barry Windham. The Iron Sheik and Nikolai Volkov. The Dream Team of Brutus Beefcake and Greg Valentine. Our boys, the British Bulldogs. Davey Boy Smith and Dynamite Kid join in, winning titles at WrestleMania 2. And their in-laws join the show with the Hart Foundation, Bret Hart and Jim Neidhart. Strike Force, Rick Martel and Tito Santana. Demolition, this being the original Axe and Smash duo. You got the Brain Busters, a.k.a. Arn Anderson and Tully Blanchard, who took a break from the NWA and being horsemen to have a short run in WWE. Andre the Giant and Haku would show up to be the Colossal Connection for Demolition won it back thanks to new third member Crush, which is the first time they invoked what would later be known as the Freebird rule, where any two-man combination of the three could defend the championship. But the legendary teams keeps going, folks. We're going to blast through these real quick. Nasty Boys, Legion of Doom. Money Inc., a.k.a. IRS and Ted DiBiase, everybody's favorite $1 Million Man. The Natural Disasters, the Steiner Brothers, Ricky and Scott. The Quebecers, Jacques and Pierre. The 1-2-3 Kid and Marty Jannetty, Shawn Michaels' old running buddy in the Rockers. Head Shrinkers, Fatu and Samu. More members of the Anoa'i family. Diesel and Shawn Michaels, a.k.a. Two Dudes with Attitudes, which led to another title vacation when the two could not get along. That's bad news if you're a tag team. 1-2-3 Kid and Bob Hardcore Holly held the titles for a single day before losing them to the Smoking Guns. Your boy Owen Hart teaming up with Yokozuna, another member of the Anoa'i family. I told you that would keep coming up. Lost him back to Two Dudes with Attitudes, who had started to get along again. Who lost him back to Owen Hart and Yokozuna. Smoking Guns grabbed him. Before Billy Gunn suffered a neck injury, another title vacating. Skip and Zip, the Body Donnas, along with their iconic Hall of Fame manager, Sonny. Zip being Tom Pritchard, a.k.a. Dr. Tom Pritchard, great wrestler in his own right. And Skip being the late Chris Candido. Much respects to Chris. Your favorite pig farmers, the Godwins. Owen Hart's back, but this time he is teaming with his in-law, the British Bulldog. That's right, Davey Boy Smith couldn't stay away from the tag team division. 316 reigns supreme. Stone Cold Steve Austin holds titles with Shawn Michaels for 49 days before vacating it, due to Shawn Michaels getting suspended with a backstage fight with Bret Hart. Stone Cold Steve Austin wins the belts back with new partner Dude Love, a.k.a. Mick Foley. Another quick title vacating due to Stone Cold Steve Austin suffering a neck injury. We got Headbangers. We got the return of the Legion of Doom. We got the crowning of the New Age Outlaws. Billy Gunn from the Smoking Guns and Road Dogg from the Armstrong family. Mick Foley's back as Cactus Jack, teaming up with Chainsaw Charlie, Cain and Mankind, Austin and The Undertaker. The Corporation's tag team with the Boss Man and Ken Shamrock, Jeff Jarrett, and Owen Hart's back again for his 4th individual title reign. Kane teams up with X-Pac to win the titles. One of my favorite tag teams in the modern era, the Acolytes, pick up gold in May of 1999 before losing to the Hardy Boys for 26 days before winning them back from the Hardy Boys, before losing them to Kane and X-Pac again. Big Show and The Undertaker team up, taking for Kane and X-Pac. Mankind and The Rock create the iconic Rock and Sock connection, taken from Big Show and Undertaker, who win him back after a short 8-day reign. But the Rock and Sock connection win it back 13 days later for a single day before losing it to the New Age Outlaws. This is the height of the Attitude Era, folks. A lot of shorter title reigns in general. Rock and Sock connection wins him back one more time. The Holly Cousins crash. May he rest in peace. And Hardcore Holly, he's back again. Truly great man with a funny and witty Twitter. Al Snow teams up with Mankind. ECW alumni, the Dudley Boys, show up in February of 2000 to win their first title, followed by the legendary team of Edge and Christian, Too Cool, Grandmaster Sex A, a.k.a. Brian Christopher, the son of Jerry Lawler, and Scotty Too Hottie, a.k.a. Scott Taylor, longtime WWE worker, finally hit his stride. Jumps in there, Edge and Christian jump in there, Hardy Boys jump in there. A lot of titles changing hands between these teams. Right to Center's resident tag team with Bull Buchanan and The Godfather pick up a short 34-day reign. Rock and Undertaker team up to win the titles for a single day, breaking up some good reigns with Edge and Christian. Kane and The Undertaker team up for the first time as the Brothers of Destruction to win the titles. Lose them to Stone Cold Steve Austin and Triple H in a reign that was tragically cut short due to Triple H tearing his quad the first time. Chris Benoit, the most controversial man in wrestling due to stuff that has nothing to do with what came on in pro wrestling. That's all we're going to say about Benoit, because that is multiple ramblings in and of itself. And Chris Jericho win the titles. During the reign, Jericho was also briefly the Hardcore Champion. The Dudley Boys back. The Acolytes are back under their new name, the Acolytes Protection Agency, a.k.a. the APA. WCW Invasion's in full gear. You get Diamond Dallas Page and Canyon. The Brothers of Destruction take care of that, though. Chris Jericho and The Rock team up. Booker T and Taz win the titles. Hardy Boys back. Dudley Boys back. Spike Dudley and Taz come in from ECW to swipe the titles. Billy Gunn is back with yet another new partner in Chuck Palumbo from WCW to make the infamous Billy and Chuck team. It is at this point that we have the brand split and the titles become SmackDown exclusive for a short period of time, where Edge teams up with his childhood hero, Hollywood Hulk Hogan, to win them. You also have Christian back in gear, teaming up with new partner Lance Storm for the Un-Americans. Kane picks up his 7th title reign, this time teaming with the Hurricane as the team Hurricane. Christian finds a new partner for his 9th reign with Chris Jericho. The infamous team of Booker T and Goldust. The very serious and hard-hitting, technically sound team of William Regal and Lance Storm. A vastly underrated tag team due to how little time they spent together. Picked them up twice after the Dudley Boys tried to swipe them. Didn't last but a single day. Eventually the titles were vacated due to William Regal unfortunately suffering both a heart parasite and a concussion. This leads up into the really modern era with Kane getting yet another championship reign with another partner in Rob Van Dam. The French heel team of La Resistance. Dudley Boys are back. Big time stable Evolution shows up with Batista and the iconic Ric Flair deciding to hold the tag team titles. Chris Benoit's back teaming with Edge. A couple of different times over. William Regal gets his health back, gets back in the ring, and teams with Eugene, aka Nick Dinsmore, for a brief reign. Broken up by La Resistance. William Regal comes back with his new ally Tajiri, Hurricane and Rosie, the superhero in training. Rosie also being a member of the Anoa'i family. Lance Cade and Trevor Murdoch. Cain and Big Show. The Spirit Squad, the infamous 5-man male cheerleaders who invoke some Freebird rules themselves. For 8 days, two of the most legendary names in wrestling, Ric Flair and Roddy Piper, held the titles. For Edge and Randy Orton create their iconic team of Rated RKO to interrupt things. John Cena and Shawn Michaels got something to say about that, though. Hardy Boys are back for one more title run. You got Paul London and Brian Kendrick. Hardcore Holly teams up with Cody Rhodes in a student-mentor relationship. Cody Rhodes decides he doesn't want to be the student. Drops Hardcore Holly, quite literally, for Ted DiBiase Jr. Batista teams up with John Cena for 7 days. CM Punk, right here, teams up with Kofi Kingston in 2008. Yes, that's how long Kofi Kingston's been in WWE. The team of John Morrison and the Miz show up. Carlito and Primo Colon show up. At this point, the brand extensions ended. And your final sets of champions are Edge and Chris Jericho and Big Show, Triple H and Shawn Michaels, holding it under the D-Generation X banner, Big Show and The Miz. And your final champions are the Hart Dynasty, David Hart Smith, a.k.a. Harry Smith, a.k.a. Davey Boy Smith Jr., the son of the British Bulldog, and his brother-in-law, Tyson Kidd. Well, actually, I think he's an in-law, like in-law squared, because... Wait, I gotta think about symmetry for a second on this one, folks. So Tyson Kidd married Natalia Neidhart. Her mother is a Hart. Davey Jr.'s mother is a Hart. So I guess... You know what? We're going to have to get some genealogy experts on that one, but they are familia. They were the final champions. As during their reign, the title was deactivated on August 16, 2010. Woo! That was 40 years. Blasted through. So, here we go. Combined numbers of days. Demolition is the top champs with 698 days over 3 reigns. That is a lot. The most number of reigns was the Dudley Boys with 8 reigns, although those combined totals only lasted 281 days. As I said, unfortunately, the Dudley Boys were there during the Attitude Era, when tag team championships actually all championships, tended to be a lot shorter in length. However, given the Dudley Boys have held gold in more promotions than pretty much any team in the modern era, especially major promotions, pretty sure the Dudley Boys don't mind so much a lack of days. There have been a total of 100. Let's see, wait a minute, hold on, because we got some... Okay, we're just going to round this off. There have been approximately 125 different champion tag teams to hold gold. Now, interestingly enough, the single wrestler who has held the tag team titles the longest is not either a member of Demolition, but Mr. Fuji, who would go on to have a long managing career in WWE after his in-ring career ended, at 932 days, over 5 reigns with multiple partners. The most number of reigns by an individual wrestler is Edge, who had 12 reigns totaling at 385 days with 5 different partners. So, let's take a quick breather on that one, folks, before we get into the next set of Big Time Madness. Now, as we discussed briefly towards the end of that, there was some brand splits, and there was a separate title starting in 2002. This title, which was originally known as the WWE Tag Team Championship, is now currently the WWE Raw Tag Team Championship. Now, what makes this amusing is that it was originally started as the new title on the younger SmackDown brand. So the Raw Tag Team Championship was originally a SmackDown branded tag team title. Isn't that funny? But yes, this all started in 2002 as a result of the brand split. Although the title would briefly also spend time on ECW, due to members of the ECW brand defeating the tag team champions. However, due to part of a talent exchange agreement between SmackDown and ECW during this era, teams of either brand could challenge for the title. This was in 2007 as part of the renewed, revived ECW, which is a whole nother episode by itself. So, let's break down your tag team champions. The original tag team champions are Chris Benoit and your Olympic hero Kurt Angle, who won the titles on October 20th, 2002, defeating Edge and Rey Mysterio in a tournament final to become the inaugural champions. Held the title for 18 days before losing it to Edge and Rey Mysterio, who themselves only held it for 10 days before losing it to Los Guerreros, the team of Chavo and his uncle Eddie. Almost got that backwards. These 6 men would be known as the SmackDown 6, as between the different tag team matches they would have with each other, as well as various individual matches, they would pretty much dominate the SmackDown main event scene for the next couple of years. However, Charlie Haas and Shelton Benjamin, who you can still see on Raw now, joined up, originally calling themselves Team Angle, would later rename themselves to the world's greatest tag team, to swipe gold. Eddie Guerrero would briefly win the titles with Tajiri while Chavo Guerrero was injured, losing them back to the world's greatest tag team, who would get Los Guerreros would then reunite to take them back, before losing them to Danny and Doug Basham, the Basham brothers, the first OVW graduates to win tag team gold in WWE. I do believe so, because most of the graduates before that were singles champions like Cena and Orton, and I don't know, maybe close, but I believe there. But they're definitely OVW standouts. Excuse me, I need a quick drink. Rikishi would team up with Scotty 2 Hotty. Rikishi being a member of the Anoa'i family, and previously known as Fatu, who we talked about in the previous tag team championship scenario. Charlie Haas would then team up with new partner Rico to briefly win the titles. The Dudley Boys are back in gear to pick up a different set of championships in WWE. Our buddies Kidman and London show up. We later get some international flair with former La Resistance member Rene Dupree teaming with Kenzo Suzuki. Rey Mysterio shows up with new partner Rob Van Dam. Eddie Guerrero teams up with Rey Mysterio after the Basham brothers take down Ray and Rob. Your boy Johnny Nitro, aka John Morrison, teams up with his original partner, Joey Mercury, as the tag team M&M. Legion of Doom member Animal would team up with WWE Musclehead. Heidenreich to form a new version of Legion of Doom who would hold the title for 95 days. Before losing it back to M&M, Rey Mysterio would find another partner yet again in Batista, who would decimate M&M for 14 days before M&M steals it back. Brian Kendrick and Paul London would pop in, having a dominant and unprecedented for years at this point 334-day title reign, becoming thus one of the iconic tag team champions of this SmackDown era. Later, Deuce and Domino would eventually stop them in April of 2007, before Matt Hardy would team up with Montel Vontavious Porter, aka MVP. However, 77 days later, they would lose title to John Morrison and The Miz, who were actually by this point members of the ECW roster, leading to that whole shared brand talent exchange thing we discussed. Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder would win the titles before the Clones showed up again to swipe some belts. We would later get your boys Chris Jericho and Edge showing up for another bit of tag team fun. Big Show and Chris Jericho is Jeri's show. Oh, okay, wait, no, I see. Okay, this is during the... Sorry, okay, we've actually discussed these already. This was during the merged title era. So we're going to skip the next couple champions. I was about to say, wait a minute, this sounds familiar. Okay, so... Okay, we get to the Hart Dynasty, who unified the previous tag team titles with this tag team titles, and eventually the World Tag Team Championship was deactivated. So we're going to pick up from there. Sorry, but yeah. Yeah, the Clones... Okay, yeah, the Clones were the ones that unified the Tag Team Championships. So, and then the Hart Dynasty was the last champs of the unified era. So, yeah, those last couple ones were a bit of a redo. I'm sorry about that. I read past my notes real quick. Okay, so picking up from the unified era, the Hart Dynasty loses the belts to Cody Rhodes and Drew McIntyre. Before the Nexus's resident tag team, or not resident tag team, but a Nexus tag team variant of David Otunga and a blackmailed to join the group John Cena wins the belt before losing him to much more loyal Nexus members Heath Slater and Justin Gabriel. We get some more international flair with Santino Marella and Vladimir Kozlov winning the belts. However, Slater and Gabriel, who have now since left the Nexus and joined a group known as the Core, win the titles back, before John Cena reluctantly teams up with The Miz to win the titles for less than a day before losing them back to the Core. Big Show and Cain win the belts. Otunga teams up with his new partner Michael McGillicuddy, a.k.a. Curtis Axel, a.k.a. Joe Henning, from the infamous Henning family. Evan Bourne and Kofi Kingston win it under the name Air Boom. Clones are back. Oh, wait, no. This is a different Clones team. This is Primo and Epico. Different member of the Clone family. My bad. Kofi Kingston wins the belts with R-Truth before Daniel Bryan and Kane, a.k.a. Team Hell No, wins the belts, holding them for a dominant 246 days until the arrival of The Shield. This particular duo being Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins win the tag team titles, holding them until Cody Rhodes is back, this time teaming with his brother Goldust. New Age Outlaws briefly win the belts for 37 days to get one more tag team under their championship under their legacy before losing it to the Usos, Jimmy and Jay. Goldust and Cody, now calling himself Stardust, win it back. Miz returns along with new partner Damien Sandow, aka Damien Mizdow, during this period. Usos pick him back up. Cesaro wins tag team titles with former champion Tyson Kidd. The New Day picks up their first title reign. The primetime players, Darius Young and Titus O'Neil, interrupt things, but the New Day wins them back, starting their most iconic run with the tag team titles at 483 days. They would enact, of course, the Freebirds rule due to there being 3 members of the New Day. And during this period, the brand extension returns and the title becomes exclusive to the Raw brand following the 2016 WWE Draft, in which it was renamed the Raw Tag Team Championship on September 5th, 2016. Your next set of champions would be Cesaro teaming up with Sheamus in a team later known as The Bar. The Good Brothers, Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson, join things before the returning Hardy Boys with one of the greatest surprise returns in WWE history, win the belts at WrestleMania 33. Cesaro and Sheamus would win them back 64 days later for the Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins would team up for a different Shield variant. Cesaro and Sheamus would not hear that, though. Seth Rollins of the Shield would briefly team up with Jason Jordan to win the titles. Cesaro and Sheamus win them back yet again, though, before losing them at WrestleMania 34 to Braun Strowman and young child Nicholas, 10-year-old boy from the live audience who in real life was a plant as he was the son of one of WWE's referees. And it was still an amusing little angle for a single night. Titles are vacated the next night because, of course, Nicholas, as a 10-year-old, cannot compete in the WWE officially. So, a couple weeks later, Bray Wyatt would win them with Matt Hardy before losing them to Bo Dallas and the aforementioned Michael McGillicuddy, a.k.a. Curtis Axel, in a team affectionately known as the B Team, before Drew McIntyre holds gold for his second time with Dolph Ziggler. Dean Ambrose and Seth Rollins win the titles back again before losing them to the Authors of Pain. Classic brawling tag team that unfortunately did not have a great run on the main roster, but did have some fun in NXT. I miss the Authors of Pain, personally. Bobby Roode would show up with Jason Jordan's former NXT partner Chad Gable to win the belts. Before the Revival, aka FTR currently, would win the titles for the first time. Kurt Hawkins and Zack Ryder pick them up at WrestleMania 35. However, only holding them for 64 days before the Revival win them. Luke Gallows and Carl Anderson are back. But unfortunately, this reign only lasts a few weeks before Braun Strowman teams up with Seth Rollins. But Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode have something to say. But only for 29 days before the Viking Raiders, originally known in ROH as War Machine, win the titles, losing them to Buddy Murphy and Seth Rollins, who lose them to the Street Profits, who lose them back to the New Day, who lose them to the Hurt Business, who eventually lose it back to the New Day before, most recently on April 10th at WrestleMania 37, AJ Styles wins the belt with Omos, and they are the current champions. So, let's do the title scene. The New Day have the most combined days recognized by WWE with 627 days. They also have the most number of reigns at 4, although they do technically share that with Cesaro and Sheamus, whose combined days are only 239. The longest number of individual days is Kofi Kingston at 910, and 6 reigns due to his previous teaming with non-New Day member Evan Bourne as Air Boom. And I believe, yes, he is tied with Seth Rollins for the most number of reigns at 6, although Seth Rollins' combined days is only 340. Whew! Alright. This one should not take nearly as long. We are getting down to the shorter ones here. The current SmackDown Tag Team Championship was established in August 23rd of 2016, unveiling on that episode of SmackDown Live as the counterpart to the WWE Tag Team Championship, which should become exclusive to Raw. Let's cover your reigns real quick. The original champions were Heath Slater and Rhino, who won the titles on September 11th, 2016 in a title tournament, defeating the Usos in the finals. The Wyatt family, this version being Bray Wyatt, Luke Harper, and Randy Orton, who is a short member, won the titles and defended them under the Freebird rules before losing them to American Alpha, who lost them to the Usos. The New Day's back to win some more belts. They swap back and forth with the Usos for a couple of years before the Bludgeon Brothers show up, this being Luke Harper and his original Wyatt family tag team member Eric Rowan, to have a 135-day reign, which was unfortunately ended due to real-life injuries. And the New Day win the belts back before our buddies Cesaro and Sheamus, aka The Bar, pick them up, eventually losing them to the team of The Miz and Shane McMahon, who would lose them to the Usos, who lost them to the Hardys, before Jeff suffered a knee injury requiring surgery, having to vacate the belts. Vacated belts were won by Daniel Bryan and the aforementioned Rowan, defeating the Usos, before losing them to the New Day, who lost them to Revivals, went back to the New Day. John Morrison and The Miz win the titles again, or win this version of titles, for 50 days before the New Day wins it back, before Cesaro teams up with another partner in Shinsuke Nakamura to win the titles, eventually losing them back to the New Day, who lost them to the Street Profits, who lost them to our old buddies Dolph Ziggler and Robert Roode, who lost them only a few days ago as of this recording to Rey and Mysterio and his real-life son Dominic, this being Dominic's first championship in WWE, as he has only just started his career. So, the most number of days held is 380 days by the Usos. However, the most number of reigns is the New Day at 7. Oh no, excuse me, actually, yeah, who have only held the belts for 373 days, so just about a week short of tying the Usos. And for individual wrestlers, it is still Jimmy and Jey Uso for most number of combined days, and the main New Day tag team of Kofi Kingston and Xavier Woods having the most number of reigns at their 7. Alright, we're getting down to it, folks. I know this has been an extra long episode, but as I said, it's a very deep, meaty topic. We're going to blast through these because these next ones are generally pretty short. Because we are down to the women's. The original WWF Women's Tag Team Championship was established on May 13th, 1983, and retired on February 14th, Valentine's Day, bummer, 1989. The original champions were Princess Victoria, no relation to the later women's champion Victoria, no princess, and Velvet McIntyre, who were the reigning NWA's World Women's Tag Team Champions upon the WWF's withdrawal from the NWA, and were recognized as the first WWF Women's Tag Team Champions. Their first match in the WWF as the recognized WWF branded champions was on April 4th, 1984. During this reign, they would hold the belts for 574 days, before losing them to Desiree Peterson and Velvet McIntyre, who lost them to the Glamour Girls, Judy Martin and Leilani Kai, who lost them to the Jumping Bomb Angels, who lost them back to the Glamour Girls, who were the final champions. So that means that the Glamour Girls had the most number of reigns and the most combined days, with 2 reigns totaling 1,157 days. And thus, both of them, Leilani Kai and Judy Martin, are your longest singles wrestler since they were the only team. You know. We then have the modern WWE Women's Tag Team Champions, which was established in December 24th of 2018 and is still being utilized. Your original champions crowned on February 17th, 2019 were the Boss and Hug Connection of Bayley and Sasha Banks, who would lose the title 49 days later to the Iconics at WrestleMania 35, who lost them to Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross, who lost them to the Kabuki Warriors. Alexa Bliss and Nikki Cross regained them. Bayley and Sasha Banks turn around and regain them, before Nia Jax and Shayna Baszler win the belts, briefly losing them to Asuka and Charlotte Flair, before gaining them back, leading to our current champions of Natalya and Tamina, who are both generational dynasty wrestlers. So, Bliss and Cross, Bayley and Banks, and Jax and Baszler are all tied for most number of reigns at 2, although Jax and Baszler's 2 reigns total up to the longest combined days of 215. That makes Jax and Baszler the longest singles wrestlers to hold this tag team championship with the same reference, 215 days. Now, I know what you're saying. Really OCD level diehards are going to go, hey, what about NXT? There's some NXT tag team gold. Well, in the classic tradition of WWE booking in which NXT accolades are not recognized once wrestlers move up to the main brand, as NXT is still by and large considered a developmental league, we're going to give NXT championships their own episode later on. Because there is an NXT Tag Team Championship, an NXT UK Tag Team Championship, as NXT does have their United Kingdom sub-brand, and a most recently activated NXT Women's Tag Team Championship. We've been running almost an hour, and as I said, in the WWE tradition of treating NXT like it's its completely own entity, we're going to give them their own episode. So, we're not disrespecting, we're just following precedent. Still, I appreciate you hanging on this long. I know it's been extra long. I know it's a long time to look at me ramble off statistics and names, but this gives you the tiniest little hint of how in-depth tag team championships have been in WWE and how the nature of a company that's old enough to have been around during the height of the territory era and to have gone through multiple rebrandings and cross-promotional deals with companies in Japan has spawned like 9 different tag team championships. That's crazy to think about. 9 different tag team championships. That's why we took so long. Because it's a deep history. I'm not going to call this a deep dive, folks, but this was definitely a mid-depth waters dive. Thank you for joining me. Come back next Friday. We should be back to our usual approximately 30-minute length. This is a nice double wide episode because I do love my wrestling. I do love my history. So, of course, I'm going to love wrestling history. Still, subscribe, comment, tell us what you like, tell us what you don't like, give me some topic suggestions, and more importantly, tell everybody to watch. Let's drive them views up. Pew. YouTube algorithm. Let's suck up to the YouTube algorithm. Somebody's got to. I'm not a good suck up. We can do it together. We'll tag team together to beat up that algorithm and be champions of social media.